What happens when a racist thug targets the wrong woman and her loyal dog, underestimating their ability to fight back? This is the story of a determined dog owner who refuses to let injustice prevail, transforming a harrowing experience into a battle for justice. The sun dipped low over Maplewood Park, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson. Grace Turner strolled along the gravel path, her chocolate Labrador, Duke, padding loyally beside her. The park was a haven for Grace, a place where she could momentarily forget about the pressures of her corporate job and enjoy the simple joy of Duke's exuberance. His leash was loose in her hand as he bounded to sniff a cluster of wildflowers, his tail wagging furiously. "Come on, buddy," Grace called softly, tugging gently on the leash. "We need to head back before it gets dark." Duke gave a playful bark, reluctantly leaving the flowers behind. As they rounded a bend in the path, Grace's gaze fell on a figure leaning against a lamppost. The man was in his late 20s, his tattered jacket and scuffed sneakers giving him a disheveled appearance. His piercing eyes locked onto hers, a sneer creeping across his face. Instinctively, Grace's grip on Duke's leash tightened. "Evening," the man drawled, stepping into her path. His voice carried a tone of mockery. "Fancy dog for someone like you. Must be nice living it up." Grace hesitated, her stomach knotting. "Just out for a walk," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. She tried to step around him, but he blocked her path, his sneer widening. "You people think you can just take over, huh?" he spat, his voice rising. "Driving up rents, pushing us out, and now you're out here parading around like you own the place." "I don't know what you're talking about," Grace said, her voice firm but even. "I'm just trying to enjoy my evening." The man laughed bitterly. "Enjoy it while you can. You don't belong here. None of you do." His gaze shifted to Duke, who growled softly, his body tense beside Grace. "Leave us alone," Grace said, her voice sharpening. "We're not looking for trouble." "Trouble?" he echoed mockingly. "You think I'm trouble? Let me show you what trouble looks like." Before Grace could react, the man lunged toward Duke. Instinctively, Grace yanked the leash back, stepping between the man and her dog. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. Duke barked loudly, his growl deepening as he positioned himself protectively beside Grace. The man hesitated for a moment, seemingly startled by the dog's ferocity, but his expression quickly twisted into one of rage. "That mutt doesn't scare me," he snarled. "I'll put him down and teach you a lesson while I'm at it." Grace's heart pounded in her chest as the man lunged again, this time swinging a foot toward Duke. The dog dodged, but the motion sent Grace stumbling backward. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. "Maplewood Park," she gasped into the phone as the dispatcher answered. "A man is attacking me and my dog. Please send help." The dispatcher's voice was calm and reassuring, but Grace could barely hear it over the sound of Duke's barking and the man's shouting. "Stay on the line," the dispatcher instructed. "Officers are on their way. Can you describe the suspect?" "White male, late 20s, brown hair, wearing a jacket and sneakers," Grace managed, her voice trembling. She glanced at the man, who was now pacing in front of her, his expression a volatile mix of anger and disdain. "You think the cops will save you?" he sneered. "They're not coming. Nobody cares about you." The sound of approaching sirens proved him wrong. The man's bravado faltered as he glanced toward the park entrance, the flashing blue and red lights illuminating the darkening sky. With a final glare at Grace, he turned and bolted into the shadows. Relief washed over Grace as the officers arrived, their presence a stark contrast to the chaos of the moments before. She described the attack in detail, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Duke sat quietly at her side, his body pressed against her leg as though offering comfort. "We'll find him," one of the officers assured her. "You and your dog are lucky he didn't cause more harm." But the encounter was far from over. Over the following days, Grace found herself consumed by a mix of anger and determination. The man had not only threatened her and Duke, but had also sought to demean and intimidate her. She couldn't let him get away with it. When the police identified the suspect as Aaron Blake, a local troublemaker with a history of minor offenses, Grace's resolve only strengthened. She met with a determined attorney, Rachel Vega, who agreed to take on the case. "This isn't just about you," Rachel said. It's about sending a message that behavior like this won't be tolerated. The trial date was set, and as the weeks passed, Grace prepared herself for the ordeal ahead. Duke's injuries, bruised ribs and a limp, were healing, but the emotional scars lingered. He was more cautious now, often glancing over his shoulder during their walks. Grace understood his fear all too well. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial, the air heavy with anticipation. Grace sat at the plaintiff's table, Duke's leash coiled in her lap for comfort. Aaron sat across the room, his expression alternating between defiance and indifference. Rachel's opening statement was clear and powerful. "This case is about accountability," she told the jury. Aaron Blake's actions were not impulsive or accidental. They were deliberate, malicious, and rooted in prejudice. He targeted Grace Turner and her dog because he thought they were easy targets. He was wrong. Grace took the stand, recounting the events of that night with a calm yet firm voice. She described Aaron's hostility, his threats, and the fear she felt as he lunged at Duke. The prosecution presented evidence, including Duke's veterinary records and photographs of his injuries, painting a vivid picture of the harm caused. When it was Aaron's turn to testify, his demeanor shifted. He portrayed himself as a victim, claiming he had been startled by Duke and acted in self-defense. "That dog was aggressive," he insisted, his voice rising. "I didn't mean to hurt him, but he was coming at me." Rachel's cross-examination dismantled his narrative piece by piece. "If you felt threatened by the dog," she asked, "why didn't you call animal control or leave the area?" Aaron faltered, his confidence waning under Rachel's relentless questioning. "I don't know," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. In her closing argument, Rachel addressed the jury with unwavering conviction. Grace Turner and her dog, Duke, were not only attacked physically, but also targeted emotionally. Aaron Blake's actions were fueled by prejudice and a desire to intimidate. Holding him accountable is not just about justice for Grace and Duke, it's about upholding the values of our community. The jury deliberated for hours, each passing minute stretching Grace's nerves to their breaking point. When they finally returned, the foreperson's voice was clear and steady. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." Relief and vindication washed over Grace as Aaron was led away in handcuffs, his defiance finally crumbling. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison with an additional fine to cover Duke's medical expenses. Outside the courthouse, Grace knelt beside Duke, wrapping her arms around him as tears streamed down her face. "We did it, buddy," she whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." As they walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the city. Grace knew the road to healing would be long, but with Duke by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next.